Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Nuclear Fusion Network presents Avoidant Attachment and Community Building. I'm your host and recovering avoidant hater, Jessica Daylover. And with me today, my best friend, former enemy, best friend again, lifelong partner, original husband, let's be for real, and certified professional life coach and lifelong avoidant ass bitch, Christopher Daniels.
Hi, that's me.
And Nuclear Fusion CMO.
That's right.
Today's going to be a fun chat. I think we had it in the calendar for 30 minutes, but we can tell you right now, two loquacious ass bitches, it's not going to be 30 minutes. So stick around for as much as you can. Put us on in the background while you work, while you clean, while you work out, whatever. But we will also be posting the recording, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Hot take. You cannot build a village if every time someone gets emotionally close, you suddenly need to reorganize your sock drawer for 6 to 8 business months, Christopher Daniels.
I don't know what you're talking about.
If you've ever said, I need space, but what you meant was, I'm experiencing a normal human feeling, and it's deeply unsettling. If you've built a beautiful community from a safe emotional distance of 40 to 60 feet. If you identify as independent but secretly mean chronically allergic to needing people, this chat is for you. How's that landing, Christopher Manholes?
I mean, it's landing. I do have some like caveats, and I do have some addendums but yeah, that lands. Yeah, that lands.
Okay, give us the addendums.
So there's so many. How do I even begin? Yeah, I think one of the things that's like hardest about having an avoidant attachment, right, and being labeled as such is a misunderstanding around like what it actually means to be avoidant and like what that actually looks like. And I think this came up in one of the like Instagram posts, right, that like avoidants don't want connection or don't desire connection, and that's really not true. Like avoidants absolutely desire connection. Like I want to be in connection, I want to be in relationship with folks, but the hardest thing, right, is that so often that desire for connection has been unsafe, right, and has proved to be harmful and has proven to be incredibly painful. And so the way I see like being an avoidant, right, this was when I was thinking about this live, this was sort of the image that like came into my head, right, is like you are standing on the other side of a minefield and you're like, Chris, just walk through the minefield and come over here. And
it's
I see
no big deal. You don't walk through minefields every day.
Yeah. And I see mines that I have previously encountered every time that I've tried to walk the field. So I know where some of the mines are, but I also know that there are hidden mines that are going to blow up in my face if I step incorrectly. So I'm trying to think about in real time, what is the right and perfect path to walk on this minefield so that nothing blows up and I get to the other side of it while another person while you're standing on the other side saying, oh, it's so easy. I don't know why you just don't come over here. Like, what's the problem? Like, it's not that hard. Just do it. And the pressure of that and the idea that I could do something wrong and that I could mess it up and that I could screw it up makes me not want to walk over in the first place. And then the idea that you want me to walk over because you want to be in connection with me, what often happens, or at least how I experience it, is that you need something. So the me walking through the minefield is not about me being on the other side. It's about you needing something from me. So you need me to walk through the minefield in order to show up for you in a way that feels good for you. So it's the simultaneous pressure of I want to be in connection, I want to be in relationship, I don't want to get this wrong and screw it up because then it'll be my fault and it'll be used against me. And then the desire for me to be in connection is about you and it's not about me. And when all of that like hits me all at once, experience such a shutdown and such an overwhelm, and then all these walls go up. And I go, you know what? I don't need to walk through that minefield. I'm actually okay over here. Actually, it's better over here. Like, it's fine. Like, I don't need to traverse. I don't need to do that. It's safer and better over here. And then I just give up.
First of all, that sounds tiring.
It's exhausting.
It's a
Being
lot
an
of work
avoidant is
and
exhausting.
also epic soliloquy. Okay.
Thank you.
What you just described is so the intersection of neurodivergence, specifically your flavor of autism and avoidance. Because
Yeah.
to be able to have that eagle eye map of the minefield and to be like, this person wants this, and it's the like meme of like all the things on the wall, like that's like pretty. And it's so interesting because it's obviously trauma that caused this avoidant attachment. And I can just see little Chris in the particular household you grew up in, like with the brain that you have that's so smart and perceptive, and that smart perception. So for me, as an anxious attachment girly, that also we're equally perceptive, but mine turned into let me control every mind in the field. And it's fine. Oh, that mind looks tricky. Let me just manipulate it to do exactly what I need it to do so it doesn't blow up, or if it does, it blows up in my favor. But I think when you have really hyper brilliant, like high IQ children in these environments, it's just going to go one of those ways. So I think people listening who are autistic probably really resonated with certain autistic elements of that, and then avoidance, and then anybody here who's ADHD, autistic, and avoidant probably was like, I have never felt so seen in my life. Oh, we've got people engaging with us in the chat. Please do, please do. Tori says, I think for me, it's also setting the precedent that I have already messed up by not seeing this task as easy. So of course now the potential for more errors is high and more scary.
Yes, Tori. Yes, Tori.
Yeah, dude, totally. I also want to acknowledge, like, it's like you and I and the dance that we have done over the last 20 years, 22, that's insane, has been really like denying the mirror in each other, resenting the mirror in each other, then resenting the difference. So like there's the mirror that's like, oh, this is just me in another form, and then there's the like, no, you're an alien. And then like really coming to meet each other on the dance floor. And so when you talk about your experience as an avoidant, I'm like fall deeper in love with you, because I'm like, wow, like thank you so much for putting words to that so that I can understand you. Am I PMSing? I'm gonna cry. I love you so much. Chris got the most emotional 3 a.m. text after a visit with my family, that I was just like, thank you so much for loving me and all of the grace that you've given me in our friendship, because it's like what woke me up. I'm not, all right, this is a different combo. But when you were describing the minefield and how you were like, this other person's on the other side, like, come here, just walk through the minefield, it's fine. But then you realize they want something from you.
Yeah.
If that person is anxious attachment or emotionally like immature or traumatized or any other thing. But Chris once pointed out that us anxious attachment folks tend to make everything about ourselves. And I cannot unsee it.
Yep.
It's so, I hate the word cringy, but I'm just going to own it in this moment. It's so cringy because I'm anxious, so I can say that. But when Chris released How to Be in Community with Avoidantly Attached Folks, the amount of anxious attachment people making it about themselves in the comments, I was like, oh my God, wow. Yeah. And so like if we're on the other side of the minefield and then all you just have the experience of you went through the minefield, you come out missing limbs and like with long-term radiation exposure, and they're like, actually here's every way that you failed me. And it just like reinforces the avoidant. Like here was an avoidant putting themselves out there, writing this beautiful blog about their experience, and avoidants were like, actually, I mean, anxious people were like, well, actually, and I felt really like, I'm so sorry on behalf.
It's okay. I think one of the things that's fascinating, right, is like you know, especially in our relationship, right? Like it is challenging to be in relationship with avoidance. Like I want to say that like from the get-go, like preface the conversation, container up top, like I get it. I see me in all my glory. It is hard to be in relationship with avoidance because, right, our go-to is to carve space to create a sense of safety. And that space often looks like abandonment. It often looks like ghosting. It often looks like um, ignoring um, and just removing ourselves from conversations and from spaces, right? And so I get that. Like that's hard to be in relationship with someone and then all of a sudden they just drop like off the planet and you're left holding the pieces going, wait, what happened? What's going on? Are they okay? Are they alive? Are they what is right? That's hard. That sort of yo-yoing of you're there and then you're not there, you're there and you're not there. Like that is challenging and I honor that and I respect that and have really worked hard to stay present and stay in conversations and in relationships, or at least communicate when I'm in a crash out or communicate when I'm going to disappear for a little bit. Because that is hard, that is challenging. Um, and also, uh, I think what I've learned as being an avoidant and what is hard, right? Because it takes so much for us to be emotionally vulnerable, because our emotional vulnerability was weaponized against us. And so we've been taught to not be vulnerable and to not share. And I'm really good at deflecting. I'm really good at like turning the tables back on you and making you talk about yourself and talk about your feelings because that's a safer space for me to be in. It's also a painful space to be in because you're constantly doing emotional labor and holding space, but that's a choice that I'm making because it feels safer. But then there's these moments where you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
do
take
it.
up space.
I'm gonna walk that minefield. Like I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna open up. And it is so soul crushing. It's probably one of the most painful experiences like in my life when you are vulnerable and you share and that share is then used against you or invalidated or um something that I was just experiencing this in another setting, right? We were having like we were doing circle work, there was a rupture and we were doing repair work and there was an expectation of vulnerability and I shared how I was feeling in what I thought was a very like innocuous, neutral way. Like I'm non-judgmental, non-blaming, non-anything, just sharing this was my experience and this was what was coming up for me. And immediately there's no addressing of what I said. There's no acknowledgement. It's just this thing that you said activated me and I'm really upset about it. Okay. So now the focus of the conversation is not about what I shared, which took a lot to do, but it then becomes that I'm being blamed for sharing something that you asked for in the first place that has now upset you and triggered you. And then now we have to pivot and I have to then devote energy to making you feel better about what I said. And then I go, I never want to share ever again.
In those moments is the answer for you to point that out and to have a boundary that's like, hey, I just shared something and now you've done this thing that's fucking problematic and I'm not going to hold space for you.
It really depends on the person. I mean, that's like, I think about attachment styles, right? It's like a case by case, like it's really dependent on the person. Like I've said that to you, like many times I've said that to you that like, hey, this actually isn't about you.
Yeah.
Like, or that is important and I do want to address that. But right now, like we're talking about this thing that I just shared. And so I would really like for us to focus on this and then we can talk about that in a different context or a different time. So you have to
Which
do
is so
so
helpful. It's so helpful. It was so helpful to my growth, by the way. Keep going.
yeah, but there's a certain amount of safety that needs to be cultivated first.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to someone last night. Um, they're in a relationship with an avoidant and who disappears from time to time. And I was telling them that the patience, like it requires patience to be in relationship with an avoidant, because what I'm looking for is consistency, like in order to create a felt sense of safety. Like I need to know consistently how you're going to show up, because that consistency was absent from my childhood. So I'm looking for individuals who are going to show up in a way that I can rely on. That when I do share things, I'm very observant in watching how they respond to what I share. And if they respond consistently to my opening up and my vulnerability and the little breadcrumbs that I am giving, then like once that has been established, I'll tell you my whole memoir. I'll tell you every dirty secret. I'll tell you where every body is buried, because I'm so desperate for that. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
desperate to like be vulnerable and to share, but it requires so much on the front end to get to that place.
Mm-hmm. Which requires that person to be a fellow avoidant and get it, or have done so much work that it feels like they can do that front end work without getting much connection back. Because then, and this is the avoidant anxious paradox, because for me to want to do that work, I need to feel connection. And you can't connect until that work's been done.
Yeah.
And so it's so hard for us to be in community together. I really want to acknowledge too that we look at the compulsoriness of, you know, the culture as sociologists, as social engineers, as anthropologists, as fusioneers, and we know that the culture is compulsorily monogamous, heterosexual, cisgender, white, all kinds of things. I also want to acknowledge that our fucking postmodern, late stage capitalistic, monogamous ass culture is anxious normalizing. So like avoidance like have such a hard time, because like instead of just being like I'm anxious and you're avoidant, the anxious sees itself as normal compulsory normative attachment, and the avoidant is the one that's traumatized, wrong, out here, needs to do the work. And it's so frustrating, and I can't even imagine how frustrating it is as an avoidant. So of course I experience that otherness in, you know, polyamory as a parent, you know, and I have so much privilege, so I don't experience it in very many places. So I can only kind of imagine, but just as a fucking content creator, you know, like there are things where I'm like, if I make content about this, people are gonna fucking get upset. So for me, as somebody who talks about relationships and non-monogamy and as a demisexual, how I experience attraction, people do the same thing with demisexuality. They are like, well, that's just normal attraction. Well, you think people are out here just sleeping with strangers? Yes, I do. I know people who love sleeping with strangers. And demisexuality is just one type of attachment. And I didn't realize until I started making content for Nuclear Fusion Network that people had feelings about avoidant attachment. And that I didn't realize that anxious attachment was centered as normative, as neutral, and it was the avoidants who were outside of that and wrong. So I'm curious if you already knew that.
That's a great question. I mean, I think you have like
I'm on the
a
front
pulse on
lines.
the beat. Yeah, like I think you know more in online spaces. Um, I do think, you know, as someone like as a coach, what I have noticed and what I've witnessed both in like personal and professional spaces, right, is that there is more of a focus on those within anxious attachments, like catering to their needs.
Yeah.
And like and making space for that and an understanding for that. I think avoidants tend to be misunderstood, because the way in which they seek safety is taking that space, right, which is viewed as, right, so many of us have like core abandonment issues, and so when that gets activated, you know, seeing someone leave or remove themselves or ghost or not engage, that lack of engagement is seen as more harmful. It's seen as more problematic, whereas those with an anxious attachment, right, like they're desiring to be in connection. They want to talk about it. They want to talk about it now. They want to resolve things quickly. They want to, and that's seen as admirable, right? Like the fact that those that tend to have an anxious attachment, like they want to take care of it right now.
Efficient.
Yeah. And so then it becomes about like, well, why don't you want to take care of this now? Like, why don't you want to deal with this now? As opposed to like honoring the space that both folks are in.
So
And saying,
somebody has to get what they want in the moment. Somebody's
right,
getting what they want and the other person is compromising.
right. And, you know, I will throw this out there, and, you know, in all this, I'm open to being wrong on all things, right?
I'm
I
not
think
married to this.
I think the individual that often compromises the most is the avoidant.
Yes. Oh, well,
Because,
because the anxious people create a triage situation.
well, and also like part of our defense strategies, right, is the redirection of focus. So,
So then are you
so
really compromising or are you getting what you want?
I mean, that's a great question, right? But it's compromising in terms of like, if what I need is space
Yeah.
in order to feel safe and process and work through whatever it is that I'm working through, like do the intellectual exercises that I need to make sense of what I'm feeling. If that space isn't allowed, but there's still a problem that I'm facing, to resolve that problem in a way that allows us to move forward so that I can then have space, is to compromise, redirect focus, give the anxious attachment person what they want and what they need at my own detriment, which is a
Yes.
choice I'm making.
Which
Like
is a
that is a
choice you
choice
make.
that I am making,
Right.
right? But the one of the funniest things that I think I ever saw about avoidance is, you know, like weird relationship with emotions, or they don't have emotions, or they're not really feeling. And it's like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm intimately aware because I feel like avoidants do emotional labor all the time and are holding space for other people's emotions. Just like you would often tell me as like someone with an anxious attachment, like you're hyper vigilant to like the slightest change in tone, behavior, anything, because understanding that shift and like getting in front of it and trying to
Yeah.
control it and mitigate it, right, is like one of the ways in which you find safety. Avoidants are also like, we're maybe not as hyper vigilant in that sense of like, but we are aware when something is wrong. And then we go, okay, what do I need to do in order to resolve this situation? Right? So we hold space, we do emotional labor. We're very attuned to other people's feelings and emotions. And part of that is it's not that like we don't want to feel things, and it's not that we um are detached from our emotions. It's just that I need space and time and to engage in intellectualism in order to make sense of what it is that I'm feeling before I articulate what it is that I'm feeling. But when that demand for what are you feeling right now? Are you mad at me? What's going on? Why are you upset? Why are you this? Those direct questions that demand immediacy and demand an answer in the moment is so jarring. It's so like it's like sirens going off in my mind and in my body. When someone asks me a direct question around
Like
what,
you're drowning and someone is giving you little bricks to hold.
yes,
Like, just answer this question and I'll take the brick back. And you're like, but the questions are making me drown quicker. And in your beautiful piece called being in community with Avoidance, which is in our resource library in Nuclear Fusion Network right now, free to all members. You mentioned the antidote to an anxious, when you're in conflict with an anxious person who is asking you rapid fire, direct questions about your feelings. What is the antidote to that?
So, what I have found to be helpful for me, and what I will often tell folks that I work with, is avoidants do best with indirect questions that tend to focus on past events and past patterns of behavior. So, as opposed to saying, like, what are you feeling right now? Are you mad at me? What's going on? What's wrong with you? What are you feeling right now? Because I am processing in real time, I have no answers for you. And what the avoidant fears is being performative or overexposing. So, as an avoidant, what I fear most is there's a reaction that you are looking for from me. And if I don't perform it correctly, then you'll be upset at me and blame me for how I'm reacting, even if that reaction is authentic. There's a way you want me to perform for you that will make you feel better. Or overexposing, and I don't know if anyone else experiences this, because I hold so much in. Sometimes when I start talking, it just all comes out, like all of my feelings and all of my thoughts and all of the things that I've been holding on to. And so I'm also worried about overexposing, because that overexposure could be extremely dangerous if what I have shared is then weaponized against me in future conversations. So those are the two things that I am afraid of. So indirect questions focusing on the past, right? So have you felt this way before? How did you respond then?
This is the antidote to direct
This is the
questions, is
antidote.
these
This is the
indirect
antidote.
questions that invite an avoidant into a more reflective space that's less demanding. Just so you
Yes,
know, I
because it's
resonate
hard.
as somebody with demand avoidance. I resonate with that. So that tactic for me is so helpful, not as somebody with avoidant attachment, but just somebody who is demand avoidant
Yeah,
and autistic, and like the idea of like, oh, you want a performance from me, that there's you want to see something from me and I can't assess what the script is here. I'm not understanding the script and I'm afraid of social repercussions of that.
yeah.
Anyway, so really, really helpful strategy for many people.
Yeah. And because if you're asking me about something that has already occurred, I've already done the intellectual processing of what has occurred, and I've gotten clarity and specificity around my feelings around it. So you're asking me a question that I already have an answer for, right? And it feels less pressure because we're not talking about what's happening in real time. We're talking about something that has occurred, that is over, that is done with, that isn't like we've already moved through that. We've already moved past that. Right? So you're asking me to reflect on something that um like I've already done the work around. So it's easier for me to answer. It's easier for me to give you specific answers to those questions. And then what I will coach people through is like, you can then use those threads, like use those lines from the past and draw connections to what is happening presently. And you can actually help an avoidant, like sort of hand holding and guiding them, coaching them a little bit on, if something like this has occurred in the past, and this is how you felt about it, and this is how you responded to it, might you feel similarly about it now? Might this be a similar situation? And again, I tend to focus on intellectualism first, which is so weird as a coach, because I say that like we have an overemphasis on intellectualism as opposed to being in our feeling bodies. But for avoidance specifically, um, we need to do that intellectual processing first. So even drawing the threads and connecting them to present time, I wouldn't then go, well, knowing that, how do you feel about it now? No. What I would say is like, okay, given what you just shared, um, do you notice any differences? Like, is there any like difference between what happened back then and what's happening presently, right? So you're still not asking me how do I feel about the situation. You're asking me, what are my observations about what is occurring, right? And for those of you who, have read nonviolent communication and believe in it, and there's a lot of problems with nonviolent communication, but like the first step of nonviolent communication is a focus on observations. Like that is the first step to getting someone to access their feelings and to access their needs, is to first focus on the observations. So getting an avoidant to notice what is the difference between then and now. And there might be a crucial difference that is really like the key to understanding how to feel about this. Because in my mind, if I'm like, they're similar, but I'm feeling differently about it, I don't know. I can't rationalize like why this feels different, or like why I'm having a different reaction. But like just those questions, those self-reflective questions, which, by the way, in general, anytime you ask someone a question that demands self-reflection, it's a dissociative tactic. So it's taking them out of their feeling body, it's taking them out of their pain body, and allowing for that clarity. So anytime you ask someone to self-reflect, it allows them to step out in disassociation, which is helpful and useful in many cases. Like that could be all the difference. And again, you're not demanding anything of me. You're not asking for answers. You're not asking for me to like tell you all of these things about the inner workings of my emotional feeling body at that moment. You're just simply inviting me into self-reflection. You're keeping the conversation going. You're asking me what I noticed. What am I seeing? To allow me to get there quicker. Like this is a tactic to allow that self-reflective space that normally I would disappear for 4 days and analyze everything. You are speeding up that process.
Incredible. You are so brilliant, and you've done so much work on yourself. And I know it's like cheesy. So Chris and I are very witchy, and part of the spiritual work we've done in our healing journey over the last 10 years has been about like seeing the path that our souls chose for this lifetime. And again, we're not saying this is universal principle, it's just what we believe about ourselves. But then going and extracting the medicine from the pain, and like you're just so much on your medicine path, and like taking what you have learned and like giving it to the world. So I just want to like affirm that for you. I'm so proud of you. Earlier we were talking about like when avoidance and anxious people get into conflict, the avoidants end up being the ones who compromise more in order to hold space for the avoidant who's dysregulated, who's in meltdown, who wants to handle things now. And the avoidant tends to be the one that wins what they need in the situation. But as I was thinking about it, like, because it's like sorry, am I mixing up my words? The anxious people, did I say anxious are the ones who get what they want? That's what I meant. Sorry if I'm mixing up my words. But like, it might seem that way, that like only one person has to win, right? So like if the anxious person takes the conflict and gives space to the avoidant, then the avoidant won, and the anxious person didn't get what they wanted. But if the avoidant handles the situation now, then the anxious person won and the avoidant get what they needed. But I have to say, as an anxious attachment person, it has never been the wrong call for me to pause. I want to solve it now. I want to get it over with. I want to get back to we're good. The air is cleared. And the beef, whatever beef we had, is gone. And now it's in the past. But it actually has never been against my best good, my highest good, to fucking chill for a minute. And I think the actual compromise, it feels like death, because now I have to go do my work. Because now I have to, so I think the avoidant might want a week of no texting and no talking and pretending that this never happened, right? And the anxious wants to solve it now in the room. You're not leaving this room. I will lock that door. The compromise is truly 48 hours, 24, 48 hours. It's something that's agreed upon by both people and doesn't, because life moves so quickly now, even news cycles don't last for more than 12 hours. So like, I do think it needs to be under that 48. But I think a lot of unhealed, unintegrated, anxious folks would be like, well, that means the avoidant one. And it's like, no, baby girl, like, you can chill. Because guess what? Now you do have to go take 48 hours to feel all of the feelings that are he's mad at me, we're never going to be friends, he's going to blame me. When we come back to have the clearing the air difficult conversation, it's going to be all of the things that I've done wrong. And it's like, no, now you actually have to go do that work. And the space is uncomfortable for the anxious person, and maybe they need to lean into that a little bit. Maybe there's something the avoidant has correct in the taking of the space to feel the feelings and think about some things. And so I just want to toss out there that, like, I don't think learning to take 48 hours is the anxious person losing the conflict need. I think everyone's learning to regulate. Yeah, I just wanted to toss that out there. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is, I mean, at least I know for myself, when I started this journey, like, there's almost this sense of pride of like staying in the room and resolving these things, as quickly and efficiently as possible, and having the conversation right then. Because again, like, avoidant, I would say, has a more, like, has baggage to it. Like, we all like hear conflict avoidant, and like that is something that is like held as like a negative, like, oh, you avoid conflict. And something I would tell people all the time is like, well, I wouldn't say that like people who you could classify as conflict avoidant avoid conflict. I think they avoid conflicts that are deemed like unsafe, and conflicts that are not held in a container where they're going to be heard, seen, listened to, accepted. So then what's the point of engaging in the conflict if there is not a desire for like needs to be met and a mutually beneficial outcome, right? Then like, yes. And I think that fear is why, folks might avoid many conflicts, right? Of how people are going to respond to it. So I do think there, at least initially in my journey, was like, yes, deal with things immediately. It's a sign of how much work you've done and how regulated you can be and how like far along the path you are. And then, but number one thing to create safety for most people is space. That is the number one thing. In order to create safety is space, whether that be physical space, emotional space, right? Like whatever that space, however you define that space and however it materializes for you, right? That space is what is necessary, because in that space, right, we're not saying things to each other that are unloving, that are from a reactive, activated place that is going to exacerbate the problem. It gives us opportunities to self-regulate and not even self-regulate. Like, you can take space and then go to a friend or a partner or someone and engage in co-regulation. Like, that is also possible, right? So it's not just like go isolate yourself and not engage with another human being. That may be what the avoidant wants to do. But in that space, you're regulating, and then you're also doing the initial processing work, right? What was really going on here? Like, what were the things that I found activating, maybe connecting that to past trauma or past situations, and really getting clear on what do I want the outcome of this conversation to be? When we come back together, what do I want that outcome to look like? Because I can tell you, most times people engage in conversations and have no idea where they want the conversation to go or what they want the outcome to be. So how do you know the conversation is over, and how do you know if the conversation was successful if you don't understand what you want the intention to be? And even saying that at the onset of the conversation, like, for this conversation, I'd really like to create a space for both of us to express how we're feeling, be seen, be heard, and then, create a pathway forward so that something like this doesn't happen again. That's clear around what the expectations are, what the intention is, and how do we move forward. But if there's just a like, I feel like we need to have a conversation to, chat it out, there's a tendency to bring in other situations and other things that we're upset about and other past mistakes, and suddenly becomes this bigger conversation that you get lost in and have no understanding of how to get out of.
Tori in the chat says, I feel like being conflict avoidant is perceived as less emotionally intelligent in Western and white supremacy-led societies, while it's actually seen as very wise and sage in other cultures. I know I speak from West African culture. In Nigeria, it is wise, community protection, and admirable to wait, gather information, regulate, get advice, and wait to speak about it with a mediator like elders. Oh, wow. That is like the impact that would have had on me as a child, and then as an adult who overcorrected in the other direction. So like I grew up in what I would call a conflict avoidant family, but the unhealthy white supremacy of like conflict avoidant, where then they're not actually then going and doing everything that you just said. Like that's so powerful. And then I grew up and overcorrected to anxious, which is I'm going to lock this door and not let you out until you regulate me through solving the problem instead of me regulating myself. Thank you, Tori, so much for sharing that. This chat is lit. Thank you guys so much for engaging with us. I want to point out that Chris and I had a 4-page show prep sheet, 5-page show prep sheet that we did not even do at all. And welcome to live broadcasting with Jess and Chris. I was like thinking, like, as you were again Oscar award winning monologuing, so there's something interesting that happened with, so PDA is a flavor of neurodivergence. It stands for pathological demand avoidance. Is it a form of autism? Is it a flavor of autism? Doesn't matter. That's like controversial in the field. But people with PDA experience demands as a threat to the nervous system. So that could be an internal demand, like you need to go pee. It could also be a cultural demand, like you need to abide by gender norms. And it could be like an authority demand, like you need to go throw that in the trash. And so it overrides, I am a PDA child raised by a PDA, undiagnosed PDA father with a PDA brother, and now birthed 2 PDA children. And what's cool about PDA humans is that they grow up to tear down systems that need to be torn down. They're just difficult to parent because as the parent, you are currently the system they're trying to tear down. But if you can raise the PDA kids to honor that part and teach them to regulate their nervous system, and if you can meet them where they are, so instead of you need to go throw this in the trash because I said so, it's this goes in the trash. This goes in the trash. It's not a demand. I'm just telling you where this goes. Anyway, you can learn to meet PDA kids where they are. I'm on an ADHD tangent. What I wanted to say was millennials were like, fuck that pathologizing ass title, right? So they, in improv, we call it ding. They dinged it and they changed PDA from pathological demand avoidance to persistent drive for autonomy. So it alchemized the semiology. So instead of pathologizing a very natural, very beautiful human nervous system that can grow up to do a lot of good, it said, no, these people just have a persistent drive for autonomy, and anything that threatens that persistent drive for autonomy will send into meltdown, right? Especially at younger ages. All that to say, as you were talking that beautiful last monologue, I was like, what if we did that same thing with avoidants who are trying, right? Avoid, and not even on trying. Let's just say with avoidance, if we stop pathologizing avoidant attachment. And so I was like, instead of avoidant attachment, they are space holders. They are space takers. What else do you feel like avoidants bring to healthy community building?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I think in general, I operate autonomously. Like, I don't need much. I don't need many resources. I don't need much like reassurance or affirmation or um like I don't need much external. Um right? Like I need some, right? Like I'm not like completely and wholly independent, but I think folks who tend to have more an avoidant attachment um like task driven, task oriented, and operate autonomously. Like for all my avoidance out there, like the group project was my fucking nightmare in school. I never wanted to do a group project ever in my life. Even now, like I work in teams like all the time, and I love my teams, and I love the
Go
people that I
on.
get to and I love the people that I get to work with, but if I have the choice between doing a task independently and autonomously, I will choose that every day over like group work, which just tell everyone, what is your kink?
My kink is collaboration, and I have a problem where I won't do shit by myself, and it's something I've really had to learn to do the other. I just love collaborating so much. I feel you on group projects though if you get a bad team. That sucks because I'm good at what
Yeah,
I do. So I'm not trying to.
no. So, so I do think
That's
there's
so interesting.
yeah, yeah. So I think in like those spaces, right? Like we're talking about like, whether it's professional spaces or community building spaces or just like any sort of like organizing spaces. Um yeah, I think that's one of the things that like avoidance bring is like an understanding of like autonomy and what that looks like, and also a um like wise allocation of resources um in terms of like, again, I don't need much, I need a little bit, but I don't need much. And what does that open up space for in terms of energy, time, um and what we can really dedicate and focus on. I think in the autonomy, right, like there's a respect for other individuals' autonomy and other people's boundaries and other people's, and I say all this not saying that like other attachment styles don't do this, but I think in terms of like modeling consistently and doing and understanding based upon the attachment style, these are things that I think avoidance like do very well. um and then yeah, I'm glad you said like the space holder thing, because I think it is true. I do think avoidants are very good at holding containers and holding spaces and making people feel seen and heard, and understanding the importance of creating safe spaces for feelings to be shared and to be honored, right? Even if I'm not sharing my own, even if I'm using as a tactic to deflect from my own emotional vulnerability, like we are really good at doing that work, and also understand, because it's not something that is readily afforded to us, how important it is to create safety for emotional vulnerability. We just wish that then that would be reciprocated. So like the plight of the avoidant is that you're modeling behavior that you hope others sort of tune into and also reciprocate. And
Yeah.
it doesn't always work out that way. Um,
Oh, we should talk about our acid trip on maybe our next live and like
it
what like came up for that. That was brutal.
was brutal. It was
But like
brutal.
brutal in a calm way.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like we've Chris and I have reached this point where we can just get so fucking raw. Um yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And to any anxious folks listening, I was pondering like what's the like the alchemized semiology for anxious folks, and I think it would be connection catalysts, intimacy activators, bridge builders, belonging advocates, um, and then the shadow side of that is not listening to people's boundaries, centering connection over all else, and like centering yourself. Oh, the intersections of it all. This is a great time to ask us questions. We're gonna go we're at the 56-minute mark. We'll go a little longer since we had some technical difficulties. Um, but you can put your question in the chat. Oh, wait, yeah, that's the only way to ask. You're not on screen. So put your question in the chat if you have any questions for Chris. But we've got one in the chat right now. But first, I want to plug something really incredible that Chris has coming up at the end of this month. Do you want to share?
Sure. So all this, like the blog and this live, like has all kind of been leading to a workshop that I've been developing about avoidance and like how avoidance can be in community. And so I'm teaching workshops Monday, March 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific. And that workshop is going to go into like what is avoiding attachment, what it isn't, strategies that I've learned in my lifelong experience, but also as a coach, of how to hold space for avoidance and what tactics and strategies work really well for avoidance in order to create a sense of safety, but also what our strategy for avoidance to be better about like taking space in a respectful manner, or taking space in a way that like keeps you in connection while still taking that space. So in that workshop, like this isn't about getting rid of your avoidant tendencies. This also isn't about asking any other attachment style to like compromise who they are or do anything that they don't want to do. Right? This is really about understanding, like, the reason why Jess and I work is that, like, I understand now, like, everything that happens in our friendship and, like, what's behind it and what it means, and same with her. And we've, like, developed, strategies specifically for our friendship on, okay, this is what I need to do in order to communicate the space that I need while understanding and respecting like the wanting to stay in connection that Jess has, while also like putting a container on that time and space so that it feels like it's not an open-ended request that then leads to resolution. And like, there are ways in order to do that and do it effectively and efficiently in a way that allows both individuals to feel loved and cared for. Because the thing that I've learned from both in all of this is that both the avoidant and the anxious don't require much. Like, we don't require much, but we think each person requires so much in order to feel a sense of safety. And that's what often keeps us in disconnection, is the belief that I have to share so much, or they're going to require so much attention and reassurance, when the fact is that most folks just require like a little acknowledgement, and that's it. That's all
I
they need.
think that there is a whole course around our journey, because I was telling somebody the other day and it like blew their mind of like how you and I, first of all, how our friendship blew up in 2017 to the point that I think 99% of people would not have made it back from. And then like the recovery years were rough. They weren't pretty. But now 10 years, oh my God, 9 years later since that rupture, which is March. Is today the anniversary of the rupture? It was
I thought it was in February.
Dude, it's this week, because I saw the Facebook memory of our friend and I had finished teaching that theater class, and it happened the next day.
Oh, fuck.
Okay, weird. Okay, it's the anniversary of mine and Chris's like rupture in 2017. So 9 years later, like how we can get into conflict and how we've actually met each other halfway in that, and it's like easy and calm, which is crazy because literally 10 years ago I would have been like, it felt like it was ego death is what it was, but it felt like fucking death, and it really pulled my BPD out. So like the BPD me in here, she craze. But yeah, I think that there's some interesting stuff to unpack there, because for us it's like nothing now, But when I was explaining how we meet each other to someone else who like their mind was blown. They're like, what do you mean you validate their feelings and then they let you give context?
Yeah.
I was like, right? So yeah, that would be interesting. And because it's not just our attachment styles that get into conflict, it's the tisms
The
also.
tisms. Our tisms clash all the time.
Yeah, the clash of the tisms for sure. Real quick, this is a great way to somebody in the chat. I don't think it was it was more rhetorical maybe, but I think it's a great way to end. Like, how can avoidants learn to collaborate? Or is this something that you'll actually be talking about in the workshop and we can just plug the workshop?
I mean, we'll definitely talk about it in the workshop. What I will say is, I think as for all of us, this isn't just like avoidance specific, is really understanding the parameters for your success. Like really understand, and this isn't just boundaries. This isn't just like what I'm not willing to entertain or put up with. This is really understanding like what are the environments and circumstances and personalities that I thrive in, and knowing that up front and doing a little investigative journalism to find out like what is the nature of the collaboration, because not all collaborations are equal and not all collaborations are worthy of your time and energy and presence. And it's okay, because again, collaboration is this word that's like, collaboration is great, who wouldn't want to collaborate, everyone should collaborate, like, you know, whereas individual work is seen as, right, has its own tinge to it. But it's okay to like ask questions and to get information and to understand like, oh, actually, it's not that this collaboration is like wrong, bad, anything like that. I just know enough about myself to understand that this collaboration as it currently exists would not facilitate my success. Right. And I think that's okay to say, or even advocate for certain changes in order to make it more successful. So that's like the teaser I will give you, and then we'll go into more details at the workshop.
Awesome. Tori in the chat said, I love this conversation and noticing the seasonal shifts and anniversaries. As someone with PMDD, I'm more avoidant and calmer and more grounded during my follicular phase and anxious in my luteal phase. And I just wanted to add that, like, in collaboration, the with each other, the nuclear fusion team will be like I will get on calls and I'll be like, I am in my luteal phase, just so everyone knows, because it affects how I make decisions. Now that you're calling it out, it makes me, I think it turns up the BPD a little more. Like I'm a little more reactive and more like revenge or y'all, I barely made it out of my childhood, I'll tell you that. One more announcement. So this workshop is really exciting, and there's something that I think equally, if not more exciting, is the challenge. Do you want to talk about the challenge?
Sure. So as part of like you know, I don't know if all y'all saw, but you know, we released a theme this month, Bids of Connection. And our focus at Nuclear Fusion is really helping and empowering people to find connection and find community locally and help people grow community where they're at and bring them closer to the dream village that they have in their minds. And with all this talk about like avoidance and like being avoidant in community and what that looks like and what that means, I've created a challenge. So the challenge will kick off after the workshop. So the workshop is kind of like a precursor to invigorate you, give you some knowledge, give you some information, give you some strategies that then can be applied to a challenge. So we're going to do a multi-week challenge. I haven't decided how many weeks. I will make that decision closer to the event, but it's going to be a multi-week challenge to really like prompt avoidance to carve out the community that works for them to be vulnerable, but to be vulnerable in a space full of folks who are supportive, right? Because we often lack that support, and we like our individualism and we like doing things on our own, but then it's also really nice to like be in community with folks who understand what you're going through, and can see you and acknowledge like how challenging it is to be emotionally vulnerable to someone, especially if they've made mistakes in the past, especially if they haven't handled things well. And that's definitely something that I've learned over the years, is like, sometimes people are going to get it wrong. Sometimes people are going to fuck it up, and they're not going to handle your emotional share well. And that fucking sucks. And we can also take actions to change that, and to like inform people and model for people and guide people on how it is that we want to be in connection with them. So that challenge is really specifically geared toward like avoidance wanting to build community and understanding how to do that in a way that feels accessible and achievable.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Churro, for doing your work always and speaking and helping to alchemize the culture around space holders.
Space holders.
Space holders. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for engaging in the chat. We've got more lives coming up this month. Is the workshop in the network yet posted? Yeah. Okay. So
I don't think it's posted in the network yet, but it's going to be in the network March 23rd, 5 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, so it's not. Okay. So be on the lookout for the announcement of the event and RSVP to that. And stick around, and welcome to Nuclear Fusion 3.0. Love you guys.